identical to the one that we saw Stephen Mann play. Two-top finish in Orlando last week, very close to Owens. 75 that he used to win Grand Prix DC, removing a source supply share for a main deck Ataxian Probe.
Ah, yes, you have to be happy.
Well,
the probes are filtered in, buddy.
Only needs 3 more.
You see, a Delver's Secret's going to start to show up here for our Legacy action off of Tundra. Bernal's going to be left with an island. He's got 5 of those in his main deck to go along with 3 plains and a swamp. So 8 basics. You do not find that very often in Legacy, especially in blue decks, as Crocker does not turn over his Delver into Insectile Aberration. Just an attack for 1. He's going to put Bernal down to 19, and we'll see what he wants to do on his second turn, which is just pass. So very unexciting, as Bernal's going to play an island and pass the turn back to Crocker. Let's see if Delver's going to flip this go around. The answer is it will not. It is a Scalding Tarn off of the top here for Crocker. Delver going to come in again, put it over to 18. There's your Tarn. And there's a pass back. Bernal will take a draw. That's a Flooded Strand. Likely going to search for basics with these fetch lands. Just going to play a Marsh Flats, pass the turn back, and Crocker with our second action of the game, a Brainstorm.
And Joe has to be really thrilled about the opening so far. Not really any pressure, able to make his land drops. He just needs a little bit of breathing space to start deploying his more powerful cards. You see a Jace in his hand, and also a Supreme Verdict, which is especially good against Delver decks.
Supreme Verdict, a 3 of in his deck. So again, we kind of classify this deck as Esper Stoneblade. It's just, it's kind of a different way of going about it. He does have Stoneblade Mystic. He does have black, white, and blue mana in his deck. You see Brainstorm is going to allow Ponder to be revealed to Delver, flip over into Insectile Aberration. An attack here for 3 puts Bernal down to 15, and we'll see what Crocker wants to do on this turn.
And for those of you relatively new to Legacy, in a format that's in part defined by Wasteland, it's impossible to overstate the benefits of having a stable mana base like Joe's. Having a bunch of basic lands means he's just kind of able to just make his land drops with minimal disruption, and of course allows him to play a potential haymaker against a class of decks in Back to Basics.
Bernal's going to cast a Brainstorm on the end step. Force of Will, Island, and Stoneforge Mystic are the 3 cards that are added to his hand. We'll see what he wants to put back on top of his deck, and we'll probably see him sacrifice the Marsh Flats to make it a perfect Brainstorm. Force of Will and Island are going to go back. Looks like Force of Will is on top of the Island at this moment. We'll see if he's happy with that configuration of hiding those cards away. Now, at some point, he needs to do something about this Insectile Aberration. You can't just, sit here and take a bunch of damage.
No, he does need to do something. Of course, he does have Supreme Verdict in hand. He basically wants to try to play the game in such a way to minimize the impact that cards like Daze and Spell Pierce can make. The more that he can turn those into dead draws, the more that he can strand Ken with resources he can't really use. So Joe's willing to take a couple hits here to avoid playing into Ken's soft permission.
Marsh Flats will get sacrificed at the end of the turn. Gonna go search up a Plains Will Bernal. So again, basics, basics, basics. And if you're not familiar with Joe Bernal playing this deck, and it wouldn't surprise me because it's not a deck that's really on a lot of people's radar, you're probably wondering what's going on with all the basics in the deck, especially if you're Ken Crocker here, because Back to Basics is not a card that's on a lot of people's radar at this point in Legacy.
Yeah, 2 islands and a plains isn't totally outlandish to actually have in the deck. So this still could be an aberrant draw, but at this point, the second plains to me would be the tip-off that something different is going on here.
That might be the red flag, something of that nature. Here we have a Plains being searched out with Marsh Flats. There's a Supreme Verdict. We know that's not going to get countered. So that'll take care of the Delver. And once Crocker does flip that back into its sleeve, going to sacrifice a Scalding Tarn here, pushing himself down to 19. So you do see the life totals here of 19 to 13. Crocker likely going to search out Volcanic Island, which is what he's going to do. You see Bernal's hand pretty loaded. He's got 2 copies of Counterspell, got a Stoneforge Mystic, got a Force of Will to protect himself with as well.
Yeah, it's just all about surviving the next turn or 2 with minimum damage. Then he can start deploying his real threats here. But he's still in the territory where Ken's Dazes and Pierces make a difference, so not out of the woods just yet.
Arid Mesa here from Crocker, and it looks like maybe Stoneforge Mystic time. It is, at least an attempt. And that will resolve rather quickly. Bernal does not want to fight over this with Force of Will. Crocker going to search up a Batter Skull as his weapon of choice. But what we've seen over the past couple of weeks here, beginning in Indianapolis and in Orlando last week, and the diversity of threats that Stoneforge Mystic can search up now because of the True Name Nemesis Wars, it has really changed.
Yes. Definitely more incentive to add. We've started seeing more swords appear in people's main decks, as that's an especially quick kill to pair with True Name Nemesis. Ken, I believe, is still on the the basic Umaza's Jitte Batterskull package for game 1, but we are starting to see more swords pop up in people's decks as well.
The big question is, when are we going to start seeing those Manrique Gusaris?
Oh, we've seen one in the sideboard.
Yeah.
One of the main decks, perhaps a little too low impact for many matchups.
That's a bold statement. I suppose it's not Kamigawa block constructed.
The problem is with the Manrique Gusari is that you might draw it, and then, you know.
Well, that's just something to put back with Brainstorm. Duh. It's free then. So Lightning Bolt going to show up to the party here. That will get countered by the actual card Counterspell from Bernal, as Crocker will untap. You see his hand right now of double Force of Will, double Ponder. Looks like we've got another Bolt targeting Stoneforge Mystic. Are we going to fight over this here with a Force of Will battle? Oh, Bernal says that's fine, let that go. And now we'll pass back. So Bernal will untap those 4 lands. He'll take a draw step. It's a Detention Sphere.
Another pretty efficient answer to what Ken's doing here.
So he can maybe catch a Batterskull with that. Right now, Stoneforge Mystic got the ready to put Batterskull into play. Bernal may consider trying to resolve this Jace, but that's a little bit risky.
It is currently spell pierceable, which is clearly on Joe's mind here.
Well, when you're playing against these blue tempo decks, there are a lot of cards you have to worry about. I think Joe is fully aware of what deck he's playing against. Blue-Red Delver is a mainstay in the metagame at this point, and so there's a certain range of counterspells he has to be worried about, Force of Will, Daze, and Spell Pierce being the big 3.
Now, the merit of your Jace getting Spell Pierce is that at least it means that Joe's not playing, Ken rather, is not playing Batterskull this turn.
That's true. We'll see if he tries to bait here with a Jace, for lack of a better term. He could also just try to slam down a Batterskull, but I wouldn't be in love with that play. That would be very risky.
It would be pretty incongruous given the way that Joe's played the rest of this game, very conscious of Daze and Spell Pierce.
See Joe with a lot of decisions to make this turn. Knowing that a Batterskull's coming, knowing that there's a high chance that not only is Batterskull coming, but his life total is going to go down to maybe 9 at this point. Now, there are 2 bolts gone, so there's only 2 more bolts that he has to worry about. Ideally, most of these Blue-Red Delver decks don't have additional burn spells or Snapcaster Mage. So 4 mana is being tapped. It looked like it might be time for the best Planeswalker of all time. But he's rather unsure of himself, and I would be too. This is a critical decision in this game.
Yeah, the Jace doesn't really get him that far this turn, and it looks like he might be going to the Detention Sphere instead to try to Detention Sphere the Stoneforge Mystic, and then use Jace to unsummon the Germ Token the following turn. Because if he plays Jace, it just kind of dies. So
Detention Sphere is going to target the Stoneforge Mystic. Of course, with the Detention Sphere trigger on the stack, in comes the Batterskull. Germ Token is on its way over. We'll see Brian Bronwyn be suited up here momentarily. There he is. So now Crocker will untap. He'll take his turn. I guess Bernal's plan here is to, take care of the Stoneforge Mystic and then try to resolve the Jace through counter magic and bounce the token.
Yes.
That's what it looks like. Now, the scary thing, of course, is that Bernal kind of gave away that he has a Jace in his hand by tapping the 4 mana and then untapping one of them and really going in the tank for a long time about how to establish his turn. I think if you're Crocker, you've probably got a good idea what's in your opponent's hand at this point, as there's a Ponder. See a Wasteland, a Tundra, and a Spell Pierce. Spell Pierce may be the best of those 3 cards, as he's going to consult his hand first.
Since he does have a fetch land, he has the option of just, for example, taking the Spell Pierce and then shuffling away the extra lands.
So, Ponder to the bin, Spell Pierce to the grip. There is the fetch land you spoke of in Arid Mesa, and Bernal's going to untap his lands and see if he can push through with his Jace plan. There's a back to basics, so maybe it's worth fighting over this. But looks like he's going to start with Jace.
I think that you're going to see a lot of fireworks this turn over this Jace.
I think you're right. And this is a good play here from Bernal. He's going to start by sacking the fetch land, so Stifle is not something that can really come up at this point.
Or getting dazed in response to fetching if he needs to get his land for something.
One of the big things about Legacy, and one of the reasons I think the format is so great, is because small things like that do matter a lot, as now Jace is going to be placed onto the stack, and fireworks is the word you used?
Yes.
Let them begin. Spell Pierce is where we start. Force of Will targeting Spell Pierce. Oh yeah? Force of Will targeting your Force of Will, removing Ponder. Force of Will, your Force of Will, removing a blue card. Force of Will, casting Force of Will, removing Daze.
So now both players on empty. Joe really needs to find a Swords to Plowshare, another Wrath effect, something, another Jace, but he doesn't have a lot of time.
Crocker going to sacrifice his Arid Mesa. Bernal does lose the war over Jace, and isn't it appropriate that the best planeswalker of all time it requires 5 counterspells to go in the stack?
And that's a very common feature of Legacy. There's a lot of sculpting of hands, as you saw with various brainstorms and ponders and whatnot, leading to a fight over one critical spell. In this case, Joe's Jace the Mind Sculptor.
And to be fair, if that Jace does resolve, it might be a game winner.
Oh, sure. He gets to bounce the token and start brainstorming. I mean, Ken's in a ton of trouble.
Bernal attacked for 4. He's going down to 2. So 23-2 is the score. No bolt off the top. Bernal needs a good one. And he draws a Supreme Verdict, so that is a good one. Now, Bernal's hand right now is the Batterskull he searched up much earlier in the game and a Supreme Verdict. And I think if you're Bernal, you probably just fire off the Verdict.
Well, the thing is, there's a lot of upside to resolving this Batterskull because Ken's in a position to just bounce and start replaying the Batterskull. I'm not sure how far Supreme Verdict gets you this turn.
So he's going to, yeah, that's going to do it for this game. I was going to say, there's some real downside to casting the Batterskull. However, you turn on a card like Spell Pierce, you turn on a card like Daze, you turn on a card like Swords.
Yep, no, but, you know, Ken's basically out of cards at that point, so it's just his draw step, and I think the Supreme Verdict likely buys him 1 or 2 turns, but it's not a long-term plan. I like Joe trying to stick the Batterskull there, but Ken had a Pierce left over, and on to game 2.
Oh, that Pierce was a top deck.
Yeah.
That one came right off
left
the top.
Left over by the draw step.
Yes.
Left over from that counter war fight.
All right, so Ken Crocker does win game number 1 after the fireworks are thrown there. Batterskull does reign supreme. We'll take a look at Joe Bernal's sideboard first with his innovative Esper Stoneblade deck. I have that in front of me. And so what we see here is 2 copies of Swansong, 2 Flusterstorm, 2 Meddling Mage, 4 copies of Thoughtseize. Normally you see some discard in the main deck, but none here for Bernal to go along with a Sword of Feast and Famine he can search for with his Stoneforge Mystic, a Pithing Needle, an Engineered Plague, a Notion Thief, and a Misdirection. So a lot of options here. I think the discard spells is where we want to start.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, his leg total is under duress in this matchup. It's a tempo deck. There's bolts that he's going to be leaving in and so forth. I really like the additional removal. There is an engineered plague here I think he's likely to bring in because of True Name Nemesis. You can potentially catch an unflipped Delver. I think he may want the Pithing Needle to fight over some of the equipment. And maybe the Notion Thief because of Brainstorm, you can catch him there. But I'm suspicious of the discard in this matchup. I think the Delver deck's pretty redundant, and you know, again, like I said, your life total is under duress. Paying life with Thoughtseize is a big cost. If these were Inquisitions of Kozilek, that'd be a different story, I think. But I think you may want to stay away from Thoughtseize in this matchup.
The selfish side of me wants to see Notion Thief come in.
Sure.
And it's in the sideboard. You're playing against a blue deck. Get it in there.
On the other side of the table, Ken Crocker has a Canonist, a Grim Lavamancer, a Sword of Feast and Famine, a True Name Nemesis, a Wear Tear, a Source of Plowshares, a Graftaker's Cage, 3 Meddling Mage, a Pyroblast, 2 Rest in Peace, and 2 Red Elemental Blasts. I think he's likely to bring in the Red Blast, for example. Red Blast, pretty powerful against decks with Jace the Mind Sculptor in them. He may want to finagle with his equipment a little bit. For example, it's possible he wants something like Sword of Feast and Famine over something like Umezawa's Jitte, which is not that effective against Joe. Possibly he wants the Lavamancer as additional threat. Possibly he wants True Name Nemesis for the same reason. Possibly he wants Wear Tear to fight over equipment, Detention Sphere. So there's a couple bullets that he can bring in, but I think we're certainly going to see the Red Blast, and then the rest of it's kind of subject to how he wants to sculpt the deck.
So you see both players shuffling up here. Pretty happy with their configurations now after they have sideboarded. We'll see what cards they have brought in and out. Now, of course, if you guys are just joining us, we've just begun our coverage here on day 2. Round 3, of 9 here in Legacy at SCG Live, hashtag SCGCOL for your tweets all day long. We'll be talking about some of those Born of the Gods spoilers as we do go through the day here. We've already crowned one champion.
And what a win.
Red-white, mid-range tokens. I don't know what you want to call it, but what I call it is a champion. We'll find a report there later this week on Star City Games, but we're going to work our way towards crowning a champion in our Legacy Open, where we do see Joe Bernal. He's sitting here at 2-0, as is Ken Crocker. Esper Stoneblade with back to basics and a little bit more spice here from Bernal. Not your usual list, playing against a very typical list in Blue Red Delver.
And I'm kind of used to seeing this from Joe at this point. He almost is always playing Esper Stoneblade in Legacy events on the Open Series and in Invitationals, but it's never a conventional list. It's always subject to a lot of tuning and crafting. The Back to Basics package, I mean, this is a pretty far deviation from your typical Esper Stoneblade list with this many basic lands. and again, the addition of back to basics. So even though Joe definitely plays his R-type, it's clear he's constantly working and tinkering with it as well.
Yeah, the first place I saw him playing this actually was in the Invitational in Indianapolis at the back end of last year. I sat next to him for a round and saw him put someone underneath the back to basics lock, where they certainly did not see that coming. And I feel like, he's probably gotten some free wins off of that over the past couple of tournaments.
I played against Joe in the Invitational. We both top-8'd in Indianapolis in 2011, I believe.
Okay.
And he was playing a black-white Stoneforge Mystic deck at that point.
Wow, okay.
So, a long history of Stoneforging.
Pluto Delta is where Bernal will begin. And he can actually just leave that land out there like that, not having to sacrifice right away, because Crocker's deck and most Blue Red Delver decks do not have Stifle in them. They've opted for the 7 to 8 removal spells and Lightning Bolt and Source of Plowshares and moved away from Stifle.
Stifle, a very controversial card in Delver decks. Some people swear by the full playset, and some people say, no thank you.
Well, if I were to play a Delver deck, which I would never do, 0 is the number for me, as a Delver Secrets will resolve.
I am not a fan myself. Well, that's not entirely true. I think if you want Stifle for reasons other than trying to Stone Rain someone, then I'm game.
Sure.
I don't like playing it because of trying to tag fetch lands. But there's a lot of Storm and, Stoneforge Mystics and whatever else you're trying to play around, then there can be an argument.
Bernal going to play a Plains to go along with that Pluto Delta. He does have a Stoneforge Mystic in his hand, deciding if he does want to cast it. I think the other thing he's trying to decide is what he wants to do with this Pluto Delta. Do I want to search up an island or a swamp at this point, or do I want to risk it and get an Underground Sea? The answer is an island, as he's going to go down to 19, tie himself with Crocker, and attempt to resolve a Stoneforge Mystic. It is good to go. And I do want to see what equipment he's going to search out here. He's going to go with Umezawa's Jitte. Crocker going to take a look at the top card of his deck. His Delver will not flip. Looks like he found a land for his draw step. A Misty Rainforest is exactly what it is. See, Bernal does add the Jitte to his hand.
And rarely does a Stoneforge Mystic in this matchup simply win the game on its own, but a lot of it is about wearing down Ken's resources.
Yeah.
That Umezawa Jitte is a factor in this game going forward, even though Joe isn't going to get to cheat into play and start using it right away.
Yeah, it's actually rare to actually see a Stoneforge Mystic live very long here, too, as you see a Marsh Flask going to get sacrificed. There's a Swamp. So all 3 colors of mana online. Crocker did not see black mana in the last game. Don't forget that.
And I imagine we're going to see Lingering Souls here.
And we are.
And you can see why Joe went and got Umezawa's Jitte instead of Batterskull.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't care about a Stoneforge Mystic getting killed here, as he has multiple Lingering Souls tokens to now try to wear down Ken's resources and eventually get this Umezawa's Jitte to stick.
I think if you're Joe, too, you have to be absolutely thrilled with the fact that Bolt was Crocker's play on his turn, and then that's it.
Yep.
No additions to the board, no Stoneforge Mystics, none of that stuff. Do you see some Spirit tokens are going to come in here?
Subbing out Joe's preferred MC Hammer tokens in lieu of the slightly more official Tom Martell Lingering Souls tokens.
Indeed. So you see Mystery Rainforest is going to go get a Tundra here for Crocker. Now, Lingering Souls is not a card that's been seeing a lot of play recently. Unsurprisingly, most people have moved towards True Name Nemesis as their 3-drop of choice. However, in this particular matchup, you can see Lingering Souls getting a lot of work done here, kind of bricking a Delver if it is flipped at all. Flipped or unflipped, it's going to be great against it. And it can buy you enough time against maybe a Batterskull or something of that nature. Now, it is not good against the card True Name Nemesis, but outside of that, it seems very good in this matchup.
Yeah, it's definitely overlooked, as you said. And even though it doesn't exactly answer True Name Nemesis, it's good in a lot of same spots. It's certainly quite the combo with equipment. It's good against opponents who are playing with a lot of removal spells. As people gravitate also to more copies of cards like Liliana the Veil and Diabolic Edict to fight over True Name Nemesis, Lingering Souls becomes a substantially more powerful card.
Force of Will going to attempt to counter Stoneforge Mystic at this point. Arid Mesa will be sacrificed. Looks like we're going to have some sort of blast here. And it's actually going to be a Spell Pierce that is cast on the Force of Will to make sure that the Mystic can search up a piece of equipment. We're just going to see which one it's going to be.
And I think Joe's happy to have Ken spend a mana this way, even though on the face of it, it looks like a bad exchange, as it ensures that he's going to be able to get a Jitte on a token next turn.
Sword of Feast and Famine is the weapon of choice here for Crocker. Bernal going to play that island. I think it's safe to try to resolve this Umuzawa's Jitte, and that looks like it's what's going to happen. And now Crocker is in a world of trouble. And I do like the fight there over the Stoneforge Mystic, because I think Joe is happy if his Force Will resolves or gets countered.
Right. As long as it doesn't get dazed.
Yeah.
That's the one scenario where Joe is probably unhappy with the exchange, but getting this online is so critical. The rest of the game becomes so much easier for Joe, and there's a lot of pressure on Ken to find an answer. It shuts down most of Ken's equipment as he can no longer equip it to things.
There you do see the legendary artifact. Looks like it's going to start by taking down a Delver. That's what's going to get shot down. One counter left on the Jitte, as Crocker will untap. He'll take a draw. Does have a sword in his hand, don't forget, along with another copy of Stoneforge Mystic, which was just drawn. But he is behind in a big way this game, and there's plenty of ammo for that Jitte with the Lingering Souls in the graveyard.
Yeah. Joe with also a Jace left over in his hand, but Ken with multiple red blasts. So right now, this is going to be a fight to see if Ken can eventually get a piece of equipment on something. True Name Nemesis would be an excellent thing to have here, as Joe's not really equipped to fight over it or the equipment. But the rest of Ken's creatures quickly going down in value, as Joe's going to potentially run away with this game with Umuzawa's Jitte.
A Wasteland's going to come into play. Oftentimes a great card in Legacy, but you can see in Bernal's mana base 2 islands, a plains, and a swamp. Laughing at Wastelands this tournament.
Another plains in hand.
So Bernal's going to untap his lands. He's going to take a draw here. Does find a Marsh Flats, which can search up another basic land if he would like. But step 1 is attacking with Tom Martell. Lightning Bolt's going to shoot that down. Bernal almost gives his creature +1/+1. Does slow down, though. And now is the time to resolve the big fella.
I think we're going to see a flashback on Lingering Souls here.
And that's what we are going to see. So 2 more Spirit Tokens going to come into play here.
And you can see Joe's tact in this matchup. With an opponent with so much soft permission, just try to whittle their resources down. Because Ken eventually starts drawing low impact cards. If Joe's able to weather the storm here, his draw steps are a lot better than Ken's over time.
Sword going to be placed into play via the Mystic on Bernal's end step. Crocker will take a draw step. We'll see what he does add to his hand. So he's got that Pyroblast there, but not really having a huge effect right now in this game. I guess it does have that Jace on check.
Now, with all that said, Joe's hand right now and deck are pretty exposed to True Name Nemesis. If Ken's able to find a copy, that can swing this game around.
First, we're going to start by putting a Stoneforge Mystic onto the stack. And this is going to resolve here.
The game being played at its current pace, however, definitely favors Joe.
I think it has to, right?
Yeah.
It seems like it's a difficult spot here for Ken to get out of. Again, an active Umuzawa's Jitte is a very difficult thing to beat, and we are certainly in a creature matchup where Jitte is at its best. So Batterskull's going to be added to the grip. Arid Mace is going to come into play. So right now, Crocker's hand, he does have that Red Blast, and then he does have that Batterskull. And Batterskull can come into play at some point here on Bernal's turn.
Ken still has an active Stoneforge here. He can find a Tundra with his Arid Mesa.
See Ken roll up his sleeves. It's time to get dirty. Might be time to equip. He also might just want to. I mean, it looks like he played around Stifle there with Arid Mesa. He could also maybe want to put the Batterskull in right away. It's actually kind of difficult, right? Because you almost want to put Batterskull in right away because you don't want to get maybe targeted by a Vendilion Click with the Stoneforge Mystic activation on the stack. So I think there's a real decision to be made there. It looks like he's just going to wait.
Yeah, I think the reason that he wanted to search on his main phase there is if Ken doesn't want Joe to source the Plowshares, the active Stoneforge Mystic, in response to fetching the Arid Mesa.
So Batterskull's going to come into play in response to Jace. There is your Germ token. And now Crocker is going to cast a Pyroblast to take care of that Jace. So he's cardless, but he's catching up. See how Bernal wants to attack. Because at this point, those Stoneforge Mystics don't really matter all that much.
Correct. I mean, all the equipment's out of the deck. They matter as things that Ken can move equipment onto, but their text boxes are no longer meaningful.
Bernal going to come across here for 1 in the air. Jitte's going to go up to 3 counters. 14, 16 are life totals.
Now, Batterskull is normally a nightmare. Fortunately, Joe doesn't really care about his life total very much here.
Bernal's just going to pass the turn back here. So, Crocker going to untap. Let's see what he finds at the top of his deck. I think the best draw right now for him is just True Name, right?
Oh, True Name is a disaster for Joe if Ken is able to find one.
Crocker to the red zone. This looks like a bad attack on the surface. Jitte can really get a lot of work done here. Yeah, I figure Joe, blocks like this and then just removes a Jitte counter to make each Stoneforge an 0-1. Yeah. And you can take care of each one of those. The Lingering Souls token stands supreme. And yes, Bernal's going to go down to 12. Crocker's going to go up to 18, but he's taking care of 2 problems.
Yeah, and every creature for Ken kind of matters insofar as they're all things to put equipment on. So Joe's really happy to attrition down the board, even though on the surface those Stoneforge Mystics aren't that valuable. Now he's in a spot where he basically just has to fight over the Batterskull, which is much easier to do when there's no other creatures in play.
I mean, Joe can even get a little creative here by blocking with the token and then removing the Jitte counter to kill the token so the life gain doesn't happen too.
Yeah.
Looks like everything is going his way right now. So he's going to come to the red zone with that equipped token. Crocker's going to go down to 17, but more importantly, that Jitte is going to tick up to 3. And now it looks like Bernal may cast the Snapcaster Mage in his hand. He's actually going to equip a different Tom Martell token and pass the turn back to Crocker.
Joe is definitely winning on one of his haymakers with that Snapcaster Mage. Ideally, something like Source of Plowshares, even something like Brainstorm could potentially be very good, but he's in a spot now where that Germ token can't even attack even with the sword on it, as the pumps turn the Souls token into a 7/7. Ken can only turn his Germ token into a 6/6.
Yep. Red zone. Bernal. I think we're going to see Bernal block and pump 3 times. Pump again, pump again, pump again. And he says, "Is that okay?" And the answer is a resounding yes. So away goes the Germ token. Now Crocker's board position is pretty much decimated, and I think Bernal is going to likely coast to victory at this point, as I don't really know what the top deck is that gets Crocker out of this.
I mean,
I suppose it's still True Name.
Gives him a long ball, but every other out is getting closed off, that's for sure.
Ton for the draw here for Bernal to go along with his Force of Will and his copy of Snapcaster Mage, which he hasn't had to use yet. And Bernal looks like he's going to come to the red zone with everybody. So attack here for at least 3. Jitte counters are going to be added here. That's going to go up to 4. Now, he's got a long way to go as far as knocking Crocker's life total down, so Crocker's going to get a couple draw steps to try to get back into this. Batterskull going to be returned to the hand. Crocker going to untap. He'll take a draw, see what he does add to his hand. It's a Scalding Tarn to go along with another Scalding Tarn. That Batterskull that he returned and a Force of Will. The problem with the Force of Will is he has no blue card to remove.
And I think if he tries to recast his... If you see him try to recast his Batterskull here, I think Joe's going to try to hard cast that Force of Will.
Actually, be kind of interesting, right? Where I don't even know if Joe would want to counter this just because he has a Jitte with 4 counters. I don't disagree that would be a perfectly fine play. I actually kind of want to see what line he's going to take.
I think it's worth fighting over this Batterskull as it shuts the... If Joe's worried about True Name Nemesis, it dramatically reduces Ken's clock or ability to race in the event that he draws it the following turn. If that Batterskull's in play, then it's a much different animal.
Okay. We'll see what Crocker does want to do, because he's in a world of trouble right now, and he does not have a lot of time to get himself out of it.
It doesn't take long for that Jitte to threaten lethal.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You and I were kind of playing a lot of competitive Magic during the time of Wounds I was Jitte. I know that's kind of when I was really in my PTQ grinding time, and it's funny, people kind of just forget how good of a card that is. It was unbelievable during its time, and it's still good here.
Yep. It is very hard to compete with creatures once your opponent has Umezawa's Jitte active.
An attack here for 3. Gonna take the Jitte up to 6. 17 is where Crocker's at. So we'll see if Crocker is gonna cast a spell, and he will try to add to his board here. Batterskull, Force of Will, looks like it's gonna be hard cast, Force of Will back. is going to take care of that Force Will. So Battery Skull is going to slide in, but again, there's an answer on the table to that card.
And this also opens up back to basics resolving for Joe as well.
Now the big question here, I knew you were going to bring that up. The big question is, do you cast back to basics in this game? I don't really feel like he needs to win the game.
Yeah, it's if Joe's confident that he can win without it, I think he's going to try to not show it, of course. But
I think that's really a weapon that he can have at his disposal for the third game. Now, to be fair, you can certainly make the argument that there's nothing Crocker can really do about a back to basics, so you can kind of put the fear in him that I have this card in my deck. You see Joe's going to keep with the Ponder.
It may cause him to bring in dazes he would otherwise leave in his sideboard.
Well, the answer is yes, he is going to cast back to basics. Yeah. He will show his hand of the reason why he has so many basics in his deck. As you do see back to basics on the screen here, the underplayed Urza Saga Enchantment. Not going to let Crocker have any more fun this game.
No, we're done with that.
Yeah, no more spells. How's that sound? And you see Joe's attack here. He's going to leave a token back, I think, with the intents and purposes of blocking with it and then removing a counter to kill the top Martel token before damage.
And he has Force of Will backup for all this as well.
And there's your block, and then there's your remove. So his token is still alive. That's not going to go anywhere, but it looks like he's just going to concede the game. So Joe Bernal is going to win game number 2 against Ken and Crocker. Moving to a third and final one to start the show here in round 3 of 9, our Legacy Open in Columbus, Ohio. Don't forget as well, we're going to have a leaderboard for you guys of players that will be following: Brad Nelson, Todd Anderson, Chris Van Meter, Joe Bernal. I think Andrew Shrout may not have played in the Legacy Tournament today. Not entirely sure. I know that Chris Anderson has showed up here.
Yep, back from, he's in a place of semi-retirement now. A player with a lot of legacy success on the Open Series.
Yep, playing blue-green Enchantress. Words of winding some people out of the building. He's also convinced Lauren Nolan to do the same.
Inspired by Andrew Cuneo, a.k.a. Gainsay, on Moto's pretty innovative Enchantress build.
I think Cuneo, his goal on Magic Online is to use the most amount of clock as possible.
I think that he likes to build decks where there's no fat. He doesn't want to have to play a Baneslayer Angel in his control list to kill his opponent. He wants to play a Codex Shredder, which provides utility because he can get something back, and also incidentally kills his opponent in some games.
Sure.
He wants to play Elixir of Mortality, which gains life, and also incidentally kills someone. He wants there to be one card in his deck that kills his opponent, and the word used to describe it has to be incidentally. That's the type of card he's looking for.
And what would that card be in the blue-green Enchantress deck? That's the question. I suppose Words of Wind incidentally kills the opponent.
Yeah. It incidentally kills them because they can no longer play. They can no longer take a game action. Yeah. So that's incidental.
Puts you right into submission.
Right.
With the old Words of Wind. That's what he tries to do. All those players here. We also had Brian DeMars come down here from Michigan.
An Eternal format expert. Writes a lot about vintage on StarCityGames.com. Also something of a Legacy aficionado.
He said no more playing fair in Legacy. He's moved on to combo decks now. I would not be surprised. I know he's been playing Sneak and Show in the past couple of Legacy tournaments. Wouldn't be surprised to see him doing that again. So we'll see if we can have him under the lights. And of course, we cannot forget about Kenan Haas, Star City Games Indianapolis champion. Got the year off to a great start with his innovative Jund Depths deck. We'll see how he's doing over the course of this weekend as well.
I believe he picked up an early loss, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no big deal. You gotta lose, chances are you'll lose once in a turn. Might as well just get out of the way now.
You can get unreasonably unlucky. That's the thing that can happen.
That is true.
So, that deck is a delight.
Todd Anderson is playing that deck this weekend. He's changed some things. I caution against changing things with a deck like that, where it's very clear that every slot has been chosen meticulously.
You don't take an eraser to the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
That's not a thing that you do.
Todd has some sort of reanimation package in his deck. I don't know what's going on there. Rumors of an Ashen Rider and an Iona in his sideboard to cast Reanimate upon.
You don't take a chisel to Michelangelo's David. Some work of art, you just keep them in the same place where you found them,
We'll see if Todd is punished for that action.
One can only hope.
Yes. Bernal's going to take a look at his opening hand here. You see a Source of Plowshares and a Flooded Strand among those 7 cards. Also a copy of Moon's Jitte. But Crocker will be on the play. He's going to start things off with the Delver of Secrets as Bernal does draw a Jace the Mind Sculptor, play a Polluted Delta. He'll pass it back. We'll check the top of the deck, and we are flipping via days for the Delver of Secrets.
And Joe's got to be thrilled, as bad as this opening is for him, he's got to be thrilled that he finally has a Source of Plowshares in his hand. He's really struggled these first 2 games just by not having a spot removal spell. These games go a lot differently if he has access to Plow.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if he was even playing Plows. Of course, I have the deck list in front of me, so I know that he is, but we hadn't seen one at any point in any of the first 2 games, so he does have the 1-mana removal spell.
I know Joe goes pretty deep, but cutting Source of Plowshares out of your blue-white control
That's
list
a bold one.
It is bold. You have to have a pretty specific read on the metagame to run that one.
Arid Mesa going to get sacrificed after an attack there from Insectile Aberration. Bernal sitting at 14, a virtual 12 with those 2 fetch lands in play. So Crocker's off to a beautiful start. Going to play a Volcanic. It looks like he's going to try to resolve a Stoneforge Mystic. And it has.
And not only is there the days that Joe knows about via Insectile Aberration, there's also the days that he does not know about. So the second one is likely to trip him up here. That is often, it's easy to get tripped up there where you spend extra time playing around the first days, and then the second days really punishes you because you've taken so many turns off trying to play around the first one.
So it looks like Stoneforge is going to resolve. We do have our life totals right here now for you guys. 16 is the life total. Apologies.
So Ken is going to put Joe to the test here by getting Batterskull.
And there's the pass. Arid Mesa coming into play. So Bernal's going to sacrifice Flooded Strand. He's going to go down to 12 now. There's a basic. But he's under the gun from 2 angles.
Oh yeah, this is one of those brutally efficient Delver draws where if Joe loses the game, it's likely to be with a bunch of spells left in his hand.
And don't forget, of course, Bernal does have 3 copies of Supreme Verdict in his deck. So, the big question is, can he get the turn 4 comfortably at a high life total?
Yeah.
And I'll take a draw, ponder. Not a bad place to start. Doesn't look like he has another land in his hand.
I mean, he kind of wants to plow with Flusterstorm back up, but if he does that, then he can't make a land drop this turn. So ideally, he would want to lead with the ponder, but that comes with a lot of risk.
Yeah, if he doesn't find a land, his plan is kind of blown up.
Yeah.
Now, with any luck for Joe this turn, he can cast a sword and there won't be a fight over it. We'll see if this actually plays out this way, though.
Yeah, he just might be walking into 2 copies of Daze.
That was a fast Arid Mesa getting sacrificed. Crocker's going to go down to at least 18. We're going to see what happens here. Feels like maybe a Spell Pierce.
Yep.
And that's exactly what it's going to be. So Spell Pierce, off the Volcanic. Bernal's going to cast Force of Will.
And he has to cast Force of Will here because he knows about the Daze.
Kind of got him glutted. I'm sure this is not the way he wants to be using Force of Will in this matchup, but he does not have a choice right now. Now the big question is he going to run this Ponder into a Daze? I feel like he almost has to.
Yeah, I mean, he can't take it with him, right? And that Flusterstorm he's holding up doesn't do anything based on his knowledge of Ken's hand.
So a Daze here is going to target that Force of Will. I think if you're Joe, you just got to pay. And now here, I think it might be another Flusterstorm. Interesting. And so here's another Daze targeting the Force of Will.
Yeah,
or excuse me, targeting the swords, excuse me.
Yeah.
And so all this stuff is going to resolve. After the dust settles, the 2 creatures are still going to be in play. So now Crocker is going to replay a Tundra, attack here for 3, going to leave Stoneforge Mystic available. So now that our stack is clear, all these counterspells happen. At the end of the day, the Swords gets countered. Yeah. Delver's still in attacking. Stoneforge Mystic get the ready to put Batterskull into play. And Joe's still in a world of trouble.
And multiple red blasts at the ready for Ken as well.
Yep. And this is why this deck is so tough. It can get off to these really fast, aggressive starts and just tempo you out of the game, or it can play a little bit longer game with a Batterskull or a Tuning Nemesis and just shooting that up. It's very, very versatile, as Bernal is going to start off with a Brainstorm, Detention Sphere among the cards drawn.
And this is a very Delver win if Ken wins this game. It's not that Joe didn't have the right cards in his deck, it's he just didn't have enough time to get them all into play. And some of them weren't allowed to resolve.
And see, this is part of the reason that I feel, and you may agree with me on this one, this is part of the reason that I don't like Stifle in the deck, is because, nothing that Crocker has done here, a lot of the time with Rug Delver, you stifle their land and things like that happen, but nothing here involves Stifle or Wasteland. He didn't need those kind of tools, the mana denial tools. He just had some counter magic, a proactive clock, kind of playing a counter slivers-esque game, and he's attacking from, two angles with Delver, putting on a lot of pressure, and the fact that Stoneforge Mystics' inevitability of providing a Batterskull and beating you that way. It's very, very tough to get around.
Yeah. And this deck can afford to play a slightly longer game because of Stoneforge Mystic. It has more power, more durability than the Rug deck does. The Rug deck kind of needs to go to Stifle more because it has less tools to play a long, powerful game.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have the option of going to recurring Batterskull, which for a 20-land deck, you actually see the Delver deck get into fairly frequently.
Yep. Here's a Ponder from Bernal. Wouldn't be surprised to maybe see this counter. I think Crocker would much rather just put his Batterskull into play, but that is going to be Pyroblast, and Bernal's going to pass the turn back.
Yeah, because that Pyroblast doesn't allow him to fight over Source of Plowshares, which is the card he's really worried about, or, I guess it's just Plow he's playing around at that point.
Here's an attack for 4. Bolt makes it 7, an extension of the hand. Ken Crocker moving on to 3-0. Blue-Red Delver does defeat Joe Bernal, playing Esper Stoneblade. A little bit of a different take on it, but Bernal is defeated, and Crocker moves on to 3-0. Congratulations to him.
Really good start for Ken. Joe, again.